Welcome to the special Lavender series in partnership with San Francisco Pride. In just a couple of days, it's official. It'll be Pride Month, and so I think I can say it. Happy Pride! Tonight, we have a special conversation, and it is about the state of LGBTQI cultural districts. I'm Michelle Miao, a member of the Board of Governors for the Commonwealth Club of California. Since COVID-19, we have had to shut our doors to our live audience programming and also now virtually producing our programs open, accessible, and free to our community. So if you're able and you can, please visit commonwealthclub.org/online and support the work of the Commonwealth Club. The San Francisco Pride and Commonwealth Club Lavender series is generously supported by Comcast, and many thanks to the San Francisco Pride legacy partners such as Bud Light, Hilton San Francisco Union Square, KPIX 5 CBS Bay Area, Kaiser Permanente, Genentech, Gilead, GLBT Historical Society, KBCW TV, Park 55 San Francisco, Smirnoff, Recology, and T-Mobile. And now I'm pleased to introduce to you our esteemed panel here to talk about cultural districts. Where in the world could you find a transgender cultural district, LGBTQ, and a leather district all in the same city? Well, San Francisco, of course. We have Bob Goldfarb, who's the president of the Leather and LGBTQ Cultural District, also president, Friends of the Eagle Plaza, and former president of Folsom Street Events. Aria Saeed, who is a co-founder and executive director of the Transgender District, and also founder of Queen Cultural Initiative and an advocate. Julia Sabori, who's the Cultural Districts Manager at San Francisco Mayor's Office of Housing and Community Development, and Sparks, co-chair of the Castro LGBTQ Cultural District and also executive director of the Masto Foundation. Welcome, everyone, and happy Pride. I think, right? We could say it.
Happy Pride.
Yeah.
Pride.
Yes, let's get in the spirit. I saw 3 LGBTQ rainbow flags up on Market Street. And so I think by June 1st, it'll be our tradition all along Market Street. And of course, it's going to feel emotional. As we know, our Pride celebration has changed just a bit due to the pandemic. But like I opened up with, where in the world could you find all of this fabulous cultural districts all in one city? And of course, it would be San Francisco. And so San Francisco, the city, it's special, and I think it all means something to us. And so if you'll start and just open up about, your own journey coming to this great city and what it means to you. We'll start with Aria.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. San Francisco is absolutely an incredible city, and it's a huge part of my own experience in my work and definitely inspires it. I moved to San Francisco. I've shared my story tons of times, but I moved to San Francisco when I was 19. And like so many queer and trans people, home where I was, which happened to be Portland, Oregon, if you can believe it. And yes, there are, in Portland, trust me. But home was not safe. It was not affirming. And so, like so many people across the country and, people who come here from different countries, everyone said, go to San Francisco. San Francisco is going to be the safe space where you'll be accepted and they have tons of people like you. And so I got my Greyhound bus ticket, and I had $60 in my purse. And I took the Greyhound and got down here. And my experience was, being a poor Black trans youth in the Tenderloin. And I've had so many incredible moments in San Francisco. And I've also experienced disparity like some other communities. But San Francisco is definitely my heart, and the Tenderloin especially. And so I make sure to always try to represent it, not just here, but in other countries that I get a chance to do trans advocacy in.
Sparks.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. So for me, ever since I came out, I was drawn to queer communities. So landing in San Francisco was a very always a goal of mine. I saw San Francisco as a utopia of queer activism, culture, and history, and I knew that it was a place where I could live really to my full potential. A really important thing too is that I came here also knowing that I didn't just want to reap the benefits of San Francisco, of the strong social and political acceptance of LGBTQ folks. I knew that as a person who wanted to create change in the world, I didn't want to just become complacent and maintain status quo. I think that also translates to the work that we're doing in the Castro LGBTQ district, that in terms of wanting to leverage the opportunities here and our collective power to do things that can't be done in other communities, and really push and promote not only queer communities in the US, but to serve a model, test things out, give voice to people that don't have voice, and just celebrate the amazingness of our LGBTQ identities and our queerness. And so that's what San Francisco means to me.
Julia.
Hi, thank you for having me. Well, first, before I get started, I wanted to first honor and give gratitude to the First Nation people of this land, San Francisco, the Ramaytush Ohlone people, and give thanks for, to their ancestors for allowing us to be here, to organize, to raise our families. And I'm just really honored to be in this role of the Cultural District's manager. It's a blessing. I came to San Francisco when I was about 6 years old with my mom and my dad in tow, and went to elementary school, middle school, high school, and raising my children now here. It's my home place. It's my first love. And what better way to love on my city than, empower, support, and amplify the beautiful cultural communities that we have had here since the beginning of time. So to be clear, just because we have the cultural district's legislation or the program at the mayor's office of housing and community development, that doesn't at all mean that, decades and decades of legacy and work and power warriors were making things happen in this city. So I'm part of a long path of justice and empowerment, right? And so in my role now is to really embrace these cultural districts, try to give them as many resources as possible, support them, and then translate to the city policymakers and departments on what the community needs, and what these folks are hearing on the ground. How can we really strengthen, what's working and also address what's not? So not much else to say about how I got here, but I'm not going anywhere. And actually, these are the folks that really should be holding the floor, and they're doing amazing, beautiful work.
And Bob.
I came up here in I think it was 87 or 88 with a boyfriend for Folsom Street Fair. And the bars were packed and the streets were filled with leather people all over the place. And I was like, this is pretty cool. And that was the sort of thing that I was looking for where I was living in San Diego and I wasn't finding it. And so I started coming up here 5 to 7 days out of every month. And I really enjoyed the time that I spent here. And San Francisco was the place for me where I could walk into the hotel lobby in full leather on a Sunday afternoon, and the doorman would open the door and say, "Taxi to the Eagle." And so I was coming back from a leather event in the Midwest and with a bunch of other friends, and all of the fun people were going down one concourse to the San Francisco flight, and I was going down another concourse to a different plane. And I said to myself, I am getting on the wrong plane. And 6 weeks later, I got my place here. And San Francisco to me has always been a place that I could be with like-minded people and people who appreciated the things that I appreciated, and no explanation was necessary.
That's awesome. Thank you to you all. I want to read a quote from a very well-known San Francisco journalist and columnist, Herb Caen, who once said, "A city is a state of mind, of taste, of opportunity. A city is a marketplace where ideas are traded, opinions clash, and eternal conflict may produce eternal truth." I thought that was just so powerful. And having lived, in the San Francisco Bay Area for the last 20 years, that all of it, the love and the fighting, but the fighting even more, because that you're having conversations, you're sharing food, you're sharing ideas. And I think that's why we love the city so much. It's filled with so many incredible people that you share these experiences with. And so when you think about like cultural districts, in the history of it, and I'm such a geek about this, right? Like, how does it actually all happen? Like, who comes together and says, you know what? Let's put a gay flag right here in this very corner of 18th and Castro, or the leather flag in Soma or on Folsom, or the trans flag and the colors, in the Tenderloin. I mean, all these neighborhoods, these districts mean something so much to us than even just, the flag and its symbols. So I'll start with Julia, because you probably have, so much perspective, even just from a city planning point of view, how these districts come together. And then it would be neat to hear from everybody else how your districts came together. Julia.
Yeah, thank you. That's an excellent question. And, first I want to say, I've been an organizer since a youth, right? And I have to say, I was always organizing around racial justice, juvenile justice, criminal justice. And one of the things, in the 90s and early 2000s, when we were trying to figure out how to gain equity for our Black and Brown young folks, we actually looked to the LGBTQ community in San Francisco, because they were always ahead of the game in terms of making inroads into policy development and getting a seat at the table at City Hall, the Human Rights Commission, creating reports about the lack of access for small business owners, for the LGBTQ community, having the Pride Parade. All of those things were sanctioned, and space was made for this community that had been, is in many aspects at the margins. But as a Black and Brown community, we were trying to find space at that table, and we said, look to the LGBTQ organizers and to the freedom fighters and the stakeholders, and let's follow the path that they're making, right? And so now, fast forward, a year and a half ago, the Board of Supervisors approved legislation to support cultural districts as an actual part of the city charter. Because we're facing so much displacement in San Francisco, and because of the affordability crisis, our trans young folks and our, LGBTQ community, our Black community in the Bayview, like our young folks, are they going to be able to live here in 20 years and afford a home? Are they going to have space and programs and nonprofits to walk into? Are the murals going to still exist, right? And so Supervisor Ronan, along with all of the other supervisors, wrote this legislation to really institutionalize cultural districts and to institutionalize community development. And so that legislation was passed, and then shortly thereafter on the November ballot, Proposition E was added, and it passed by a majority of over 70% by the voters to say yes. The voters were saying we need our arts, but we also need our culture and we need our community. So that allocated a portion of the hotel tax fund to actually fund cultural districts. which is important, right? So if we have other planners from other cities listening, it's not just about writing down that we care about this, but it's about allocating dollars to it and writing that into the code. So that really set up the blueprint. And there were 5 cultural districts that organized hand in hand with that supervisor and wrote it and analyzed and got it passed. And since then, we've added 3 more cultural districts in the Bayview, Castro, and also the American Indian Cultural District. So that's just really that first push that path got us into action, and then I, open it up to my colleagues here.
Sparks, how did the Castro, cultural district happen? I know that's all in one show, but you'll do your best.
Yeah, that's it's funny, Michelle, for you to ask me right after Julia, because we of the LGBTQ cultural districts are the most infant. If you started by saying, the city is a state of mind, of taste. If we are a state, we are a state in development. That is for sure. Before we actually elected our first board members, there were over a year and a half of working groups that came together to gather feedback and figure out, start thinking about our visioning, our election procedures, our outreach. In November, we elected our first 5 board members. In January, we held our second election, our next 5 board members, and we were in the process before COVID happened of electing our final 5 board members. These all happened through public elections where more than 200 people participated in each election, which just reflects people's excitement about supporting the cultural districts and the LGBTQ cultural district. And so we're still coming together. We recently submitted our proposal to the city, and we're diving into all of it. We're all excited. We recognize that cultural preservation and promoting a cultural legacy is not something that just happens. It's something that needs to be developed diligently, mindfully, collectively, and collaboratively. So we all hold those values, but also working across all of our differences to figure out how we're going to move forward. So that's where we are right now.
Aria, also very exciting, the Transgender Cultural District. It's the first in the entire country, if not the world.
Yeah. Which is absolutely incredible. I know that that's like our tagline, I guess, but I still have trouble digesting what that means. And I think that's a huge part of just our journey. So, the transgender district, we did not initially set out to start a district. I don't think that was something that we knew was possible. Our work really sort of was in response to development encroaching in the Tenderloin. And so for those listening, in San Francisco, there have been certain neighborhoods that have traditionally held a community or population. And then the term is gentrification, where new people are coming in and the housing market goes up. The cost of living overall becomes inaccessible for the people that have traditionally lived in that neighborhood. And so with the Mission District and SOMA in particular, we were absolutely afraid that Tenderloin was sort of the new frontier because politically it's always been the most undesirable neighborhood for City Hall when it comes to politics. It's the last to get the streets paved. It's the last to get street cleaned. Like the Tenderloin has largely been neglected by our city, and it's been happening for over 100 years. And so, when this developer was coming in, while we can't stop someone from purchasing a plot of land or a city block like they did, we wanted to ensure that they provided a community benefit to specifically the trans community in the Tenderloin, because Compton, the site of Compton's Cafeteria Riot, is literally diagonal across the street from their site of luxury condos and hotels. And so that advocacy was really sort of rooted in fear of possible displacement. For those who don't know, the Tenderloin has perhaps the largest transgender population of any neighborhood in San Francisco, but perhaps also the country. And transgender people have continuously resided in the neighborhood as early documented as the 1920s. And so having access to that rich history really helped us catapult our effort in getting a community benefit process from the developer. And then in our planning, we discovered that it was absolutely possible to start a district so that trans people 100 years from now can inherit an urban space and place that says that you belong here. The district was founded by 3 Black trans women. I think that's always important to highlight. It was myself, Honey Mahogany, and Janetta Johnson. And Janetta and I have specifically lived in the Tenderloin for many years. And so that and the experience of our sisters, when you come to San Francisco as a Black trans woman, you know, everyone says it's amazing and it's all accepting. And that is true to some regard, but then you're like sort of stuck in the Tenderloin. And no one cares, no one's helping you. You know, for us and the girls that I knew and I came up with, you know, we could get our hormones for free, but we couldn't get housing. No one would hire us. Like, we would go into job interviews and get laughed at in San Francisco on 4th and Market. And so we sort of had this experience of being disillusioned and sort of feeling forgotten in San Francisco in the mix. Of course, gay white people hold a lot of political power in San Francisco. And so people are always like, oh, LGBT people have a voice. But, you know, who is represented in that? It's never been Black trans women. And so that was really sort of the spirit behind our advocacy and ensuring that people of color, trans people, are represented intersectionally in the neighborhood. And I think we did that. I think our work gives people hope. And we've gotten inquiries from trans people in Paris and Brazil and wherever else, New York, Atlanta, New Orleans, and they want to start a district of their own. And I think that's incredible because I think we finally get to have a place that we get to call home and a sense of belonging. And that's what we're promoting.
That's so beautiful. Bob, also very exciting. And I'm not sure, but definitely maybe one of the first, a leather LGBTQ cultural district here in San Francisco.
We believe it's the first leather cultural district in the world. Actually, we can't back that up, but we certainly believe it's true. And the leather community started to really locate in SoMa in the 60s, and it has been quite strong there ever since. And in the summer of 1980, there were 55 leather and LGBTQ businesses in SoMa. And today we count 14, and well, actually now 13 with the closure or relocation of the stud. And the displacement of the leather stores, businesses, clubs has been something that has happened since the 80s. And the Folsom Street Fair was started in 1984 in response to gentrification and displacement. And so we're seeing that resurgence in displacement at this time. And the cultural districts are, I think, the more modern way or the newest way, the newest tool in the toolbox to deal with that. And the leather community has been a real focus and one of the elements that makes San Francisco unique and a wonderful place to live and a real symbol of its tolerance. And so it is our objective to keep that going. And about 10 years ago, starting about 10 years ago, there were a couple of attempts to create something along the lines of a cultural district, and they never quite gained traction. And about, let's see, it was in 2018, Rachel Ryan, working with Supervisor Kim, established legislation to found the Leather and LGBTQ Cultural District. She began having community meetings, which I started attending, and wound up at some point getting elected chair of. And so it was with the community support and the support of the supervisors and the mayor that the cultural district came to be. And I went and lobbied all of the supervisors, and I wasn't really sure what to expect, when I went to all of the supervisors' offices. And I have to say that absolutely every single San Francisco supervisor was completely supportive. There was no reticence or hesitation. There was 100% support from all of them. And our resolution passed unanimously. And it's with that combination of city support and the mayor's office and the supervisors that the district came to be.
That's awesome. That's so incredible. That's why I say we love the city, but I think we love us. We love our community who make things happen. Thank you to our audience members who are sending in questions and comments. Please keep them coming. We love when you're engaged in the program. I love it because then it means I don't have to ask all the questions. I want to read a couple comments and then leading up to a question from an audience member. I moved to San Francisco in 1995, mostly to be among gay friends I knew online. Yes, in 1995. Sadly, I was priced out. So much of what is said here reminds me of what I miss. Another comment, I'm interested in seeing more environmental justice and equity building as well as preservation for these cultural districts. And so that leads to a question, I think, because you all have kind of touched on the heart of why these cultural districts are necessary. But what does it mean to you to have a cultural district supporting this aspect of your life? And we will start with Sparks.
And sorry, Michelle, can you repeat the question one more time? I think my thing blipped out.
Yeah. There were just some comments, and all of the panelists had really talked about the importance of having, right, these cultural districts and kind of what they mean to us from some of the social justice issues that we face and issues around even migrating to a city like San Francisco. So what does it mean to you, and this is a question from our audience, to have a cultural district supporting this aspect of your life?
So there, the city, and in the last 16 years that I've been here, the city has definitely evolved and changed. And right now, in just the last few months, it's changed in ways that we never would have imagined. And I really think right now for the cultural district, actually one of our hopes and goals is to push back against change. Although change equals progress, change and increasingly with the economic challenges that we're facing with limited housing, access to resources, it's something that we realized with the Castro LGBTQ Cultural District that one of our roles is to put the brakes on those negative changes that are pushing our communities out and create opportunities to gather wider feedback, to engage more people in the conversation, to bring visibility to issues for folks that haven't been able to have a voice. And so we really want to do that, and again, still trying to, without the diversity of our group, figure all this out. But hoping in the future that where we are a year from now, or 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we'll have improved things in the Castro, not just for the LGBTQ community, but for LGBTQ communities around the world to see.
Anyone want to add to that before we move to the next question? All right. Speaking of, change, I had this question here, and I was thinking about it because like change is a constant in a city like San Francisco, and I think what keeps us coming back is fighting the change in a lot of ways. Like many of us who can stay, or even if the displacement is happening, there are other folks in our community who will step up and fight for us. Some of us stay to fight the change, and some of us embrace the change as the constant beauty of the city. But how does your cultural district adapt, to that idea? Especially we know that we have to do all that we can to preserve and its uniqueness and what the purpose that it serves for our community. Like the district, it's not there just as like Aria said one day. This is going to be a symbol for future generations of transgender people to know that they have a home, that there's a city, there's a place for them. And so kind of along those ideas, of this change, I mean, how does the cultural district adapt to that? Like, if you understand what I'm saying. I mean, the Castro, for example, looks completely different than when it started. The transgender cultural district continues to adapt to that change in a lot of ways, and so on. So we'll start with Aria, just because you brought it up.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would be amiss to not acknowledge, while we are fighting the impact of change, I think we would be amiss if we didn't sort of adapt with it. San Francisco is not the same city that I lived in 10 years ago. And it's not going to be, unfortunately. It, first of all, has a very different industry. Once upon a time, San Francisco used to have a stock exchange. It does not have a stock exchange anymore, but its commerce now is tech. And for so many years, in the beginning of my advocacy in particular, we were always sort of fighting, like, no tech, techies, go away, like all this kind of stuff. And, I think as I matured in my advocacy and specifically with the district, I have been meeting with tech companies and like, okay, you all are here and it looks like you guys are here to stay. So how can we bring trans folks in here? How can we create economic pipelines for trans people to be stabilized long term in their own lives? And how do we create something that's more equitable? And how can you reach back? And the response that I've found has been really surprising. So, we are partnering with a developer that has moved into our neighborhood. And in our advocacy, we will have a community center, and it's currently being built, right? And they have sponsored the entirety of the cost towards that. I've partnered with Sephora and LinkedIn and other companies to be more intentional on how to be more intentional in hiring specifically trans people of color, but also communities of color and folks who are more marginalized and disenfranchised. And yeah, I think cultural districts also have to acknowledge who else is in the neighborhood. So with my team, something that we always talk about is the Tenderloin specifically is perhaps one of the most diverse neighborhoods in San Francisco. There's a huge Arab population, Vietnamese, Cambodian, Black, etc., homeless, housed. And so how does our work, while specific in uplifting the voices and the lived experience of trans people, how does our work also benefit them? The rest of the population that lives in the neighborhood. And so in our work with Julia's office and with the SFMTA and Department of Public Works, they changed their name, SF Public Works. We've been advocating for more trees, for the sidewalks to be tribute to the trans community and to trans history, to develop the streets and install more crosswalks, and the city has been absolutely receptive of that. And so in the coming years, it'll be both a benefit to the trans community and the broader population that lives in the neighborhood. And so I think change is just sort of ever present. And like the experience that we're having now with COVID-19, you just have to adapt, and ensure that the guiding values of your district, or your effort are still maintained with the adaptation. For ours, the trans district is for anyone and everyone who identifies as trans or gender nonconforming or relates to that experience in any way. But it was important that our leadership represent the trans people that often live in this area, in particular, and that is Black trans women. And so, while we are uplifting Black trans women into leadership and pipelines for business ownership, we believe that that will then benefit everyone. And if you support and create solutions for the most impacted of your community, then everyone benefits. And so that's just part of adapting to that change.
I was gonna say, Julia, do you want to follow that? Just from also, yeah,
Sure.
how does this
You know,
city, yeah, adapt to the change and also being protective of its cultural districts?
well, to echo, change is inevitable. It's part of our, our human thread and our existence of life, and it brings a lot of trauma, right? And if we go back to the gold rush days and to folks coming in from all places of this globe, it displaced Native people, in a very genocidal, violent way, and that was the fuel of that was capitalism. And here we are today, gentrification or the housing crisis again is traumatic, and it is fueled by capitalism. So how do we balance um, access and equity and make sure that like our communities that have every right and every essence of life that want to continue to live here still have the place to do that? I have lost so many of my friends and family in San Francisco. I feel a little bit, of the last of my tribe here trying to hold on. Me and my colleagues that are from San Francisco in the city say like, go hard or go home. Like this is our last ditch effort. We're going to save the soul of San Francisco by any means necessary. And what that means is by supporting the leadership of the communities to continue to organize and prepare our people to stay and to make sure that there's access to resources, right? And so one of the key staples of the cultural districts is to build a better, stronger, clearer relationship between the community stakeholders and organizations and the city departments. And so it's not really about learning some crazy blueprint map of how City Hall works anymore. It is a different day in that City Hall and departments are more open, right? And so we have a city department steering committee that has planning department, Office of Economic Workforce Development, Arts Commission, Historic Preservation are all at the table on a weekly basis with me, figuring out how do we get resources to these cultural districts in a more expedited and efficient way. Bob gives us a call directly and says, this business is in danger. What can we do? And, we do the best we can. We put our capes on and, we try to problem solve. We can't always, do everything, which is like heartbreaking, but we do our best, right? And, we do what we can. And the most important piece is about opening up communication so that we can find out how to better serve our communities. And I'd say, I have a lot of really beautiful elders in my life that help me navigate life, right? And this work is part of life. This is spiritual work that we're doing. And COVID-19 has made us all focus inward on the essentials that our families and our relatives need, and the cultural districts are going to respond to that. Already, like ARIA has been, and the trans cultural district has been giving emergency funding to the trans community since day one, right? She moved mountains and made that happen regardless of, city red tape, whatever. I know you got to do what you got to do. And before the Castro Cultural District was even, the ink was dry, they were already, putting up murals and trying to help beautify the Castro and all the boards. So it's about taking change as an element of our life and being, like what Bruce Lee would say, be like water and adapt and be flexible and do the best you can to be fluid.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Speaking of, I mean, we talk a lot about what it means to us, and because we're the ones, doing the work, you're the ones doing the work, and making sure that our identity and our safety is there in these cultural districts. But I also think, these cultural districts transform people who may not have ever known about a transgender flag or walking the Castro for the very first time. And now, the leather LGBTQ cultural district, and some will say, like, what exactly is that? What's the leather community? So Bob, will start with you in talking about how the neighborhoods, the districts can transform human beings, not just from like a tourist point of view, but for educational and to be informative for those purposes.
Well, I think there are a lot of different ways that we work to do that. The part of it is elements that I'll call placemaking. In our district, there is what's called the Ringgold Alley Memoir Walk, and on Ringgold Alley, there are a series of plaques in the sidewalks as well as standing stones that commemorate the businesses and people that are no longer with us. And the people who were chosen were iconic for some reason, whether it was, the bar they owned or their activism or their art. And it is those sorts of memorial elements to remind people what was here originally and what we no longer have. That sort of informs, why is Mr. S here? Why is the eagle there? And sort of let people know what this area in the district was all about. And in addition to that, there are a number of groups in the district that operate in the district that offer educational programs about the various aspects of leather, and those organizations offer them instruction at different levels. Some are at the very high level, more philosophical perspective, and some are a little more hands-on, shall we say. And so I think that those are the ways that the leather community is trying to inform people what it means to be leather, what that is about. And part of our job as a cultural district is to make sure that the groups who are providing that education and those memorial placemaking items are both continued and added to in the future. And one of our objectives is to make sure that our community groups have space to meet, which is very important and getting extremely difficult to find reasonably priced meeting space for grassroots groups to meet. And it's our long run objective to purchase a building in Soma so that we can have a community center from which we cannot be displaced.
Sparks, what about the Castro LGBTQ cultural district? The neighborhood and the history of the Castro has been around a while, but you had mentioned earlier that the structure, the organization is quite fairly new, but I think that all comes full circle to, what the history means to the city, but what people know about the LGBTQ community. And then also now, even though things have changed, we've talked about changed a lot, the history continues on and it continues to transform people's lives.
I think one of the things that we as a board right now are all that is on the top of our minds is, as you pointed out, the celebrating the rich history of the Castro, the political significance, our leaders, but also most definitely at the center acknowledging the vast majority of individuals now who have been excluded from those histories, and acknowledging the reality that the unfortunate reality that for most people of color, particularly Black and Brown folks, trans, non-binary folks, and queer women, the Castro continues to fail in reflecting the diversity, the beautiful diversity of our community, and so and in many ways continues to cater to folks who are affluent, white, and or gay. A lot of people, as much as my heart fills with pride and swells with pride when I see the Castro Theater sign or when I hear the flag flapping above my head, it is so important that we understand that there is so much potential of the Castro to truly reflect the beautiful diversity within our community, and it's important to me and to us when people come from around the world, when people look at what we've created and built in the Castro Cultural District, that they see their stories reflected in that. So as we're in formation, one of the things that we're really doing is all of us have collectively agreed that inclusivity and diversity is going to be something that is at the forefront. It's not just going to happen. It's something that we need to absolutely push for. If you build it, they will not come. We actually need to proactively reach out and invite people in, people that maybe haven't felt safe or haven't felt community from the Castro. So those are, well, also on our board, balancing people with very different backgrounds, interests, goals. So that's really a lot of the things that we're grappling with right now, celebrating the history, acknowledging the failures in our history, and inviting more people in to create a better future.
I'm going to go back to our audience. Thanks again for joining us and sending in your questions and your comments. They're so great. We have from George Ridgely, who would like for you to all to know, thank you for the work that every one of you is doing to preserve our history, honor our ancestors, and enrich life in San Francisco for all of us. We have another comment. We in San Francisco are so fortunate to have the vision, dedication, and hard work of these amazing individuals, so thank you. Tech companies, yes, make them engage. That's awesome. So a question from the audience, are there any additional LGBTQ cultural districts that are being considered? And if so, what's the status? Julia is smiling. There's secret planning happening? Is another cultural district popping up? The first of something?
Not that I know of. I smile because I have such a bountiful and abundance of work to do already with these beautiful 8 cultural districts. It's a little overwhelming to think of new ones. But the community will talk and we will respond, and I will be present for that. It's just me at MOHCD doing the cultural district magic. But that's a blessing, and I get to learn a lot. And we're going into our second fiscal year with our first cohort of cultural districts. And so the work continues, and it's an exciting time. It's exciting to bring on Castro and American Indian. And one of the important things for us is that we work together as a cohort because we're more powerful together, right? There's so much intersectionality between our histories throughout the cultural districts, that together we can build policy that's going to benefit everybody. So I look forward to this COVID being over so we can all get back in the room together and celebrate successes. But also, we'll continue to do it in Zoom too. But if anybody hears of another one coming up, let me know.
Speaking of the work, I mean, is there anything that you could maybe tease us with of some ideas that have been floating of what changes might come to your district, or maybe some policy, some ideas of how it might impact lives in your district? This is a question to anyone who wants to jump in and share with us. Literally, like, Aria.
I'm like, I don't know if I can spill that tea yet.
Oh no! Oh come on! It's fine.
Are there any changes in policies? Yeah, we're trying to grapple with what is the role of a cultural district in a virtual world. Our work was sort of founded to actually bring community together and create space for that. And we are adapting. I mean, we've been having virtual hangout sessions for community. Our community advisory council is now virtual, which is comprised of residents who are trans in the neighborhood. And, we did have to cancel like our huge upcoming events. And I think because they were in person. And so something we struggle with is what is the role of a cultural district in 2019, or what year is it? Oh my God, I'm sorry. What is our role in a COVID-19, there we go, COVID-19 world and after? And will it be the same? Because I know personally for me, and we've been hearing from community, there's the longer, I think it's 76 days of quarantine so far. I don't know who's counting, but that I have developed an agoraphobia. Other people have developed an intense fear of going outside, and definitely a fear of possible interaction with more than 4 people. So, I don't know what comes next, but we are working on stuff and we're making decisions like whether we have an office or not, or all those things, just because we just don't know.
Anyone want to add to that?
Well, I think similarly, as far as change goes, in the age of COVID-19, we're similarly doing online programs to try and create a sense of community. So all of the bars and nightlife venues are, of course, closed. And so we're doing happy hours every week where we have a bartender and people can sign on and chat just as if they were at the bar. And we're also doing erotic storytelling nights, and we're looking at adding some similar programs, again, to sort of create this sense of community and provide an outlet for, people who have to stay at home now, and, which that's one of the big parts of our district. And so we're looking for ways to make that happen when we do have to stay at home.
Did you say erotic storytelling night?
Yes, I did.
Oh, well, I'd like to join that. Thank you, Bob.
Well, you are welcome. I will be happy to send you the link.
I've had so much fun with you all, and it's just been so great. And hearing your stories and the work that you do really reminds us all, that we're so lucky to be in community with incredible people. The San Francisco Pride Board thanks you all for doing the work that you do and being part of the Lavender series. And so as we wind down, I have one final question for all of you. Cultural districts are like the mini prides that exist 365 days of the year. And so for me, once I see that huge LGBTQ flag, as I mentioned earlier, at the top of Castro and Market, I stand a little bit taller and my heart flutters. I think a lot of us feel this way. I do the same when I walk through the Tenderloin and I see the transgender flag, and I know that, history has been made. And also because I know the founders and they're my friends and they're just incredible people. But also now how exciting the leather flag, which it's new. It's, the first of its kind. So I know what it means to be proud of our community when I step into these districts. What about you? We'll start with Julia.
Excellent question. Well, if I could just pivot just a little bit.
Yep.
And just really share, because I wanted to answer that last question around a little sneak peek. And so as I've been sort of meditating and trying to figure out, like, what does this post-COVID cultural district world look like? A couple of things that come to me, because I love the cultural districts and what it stands for so much and what it feels like. I took a drive just like literally a couple of days ago and drove all through the different cultural districts to feel the energy of what are these barren streets, however filled with our people living on them, right? Let's not forget folks who are unhoused but are out there. These walls and these homes and these districts are still alive, although emptier visually. And what came to me when I was driving through all of the San Francisco cultural districts is this one is that this is really a time forced upon us to do some reflection. So I'm hoping that the board, these leaders really take this time to have a break, right, from always engaging in human interaction and really are reflecting inwards around, like, what does it mean to be a cultural district? What are the next steps? And figuring that out, right? And then looking at some of these challenges and that our community members are having, like hearing Aria describe our folks being like really fearful around going out, addressing some of that trauma within individual spirits. This is the time to work on doing that. And then finally, like, honestly, even though we're so challenged, actually the cultural districts needs to go worldwide. Like, we're not just a hub for San Francisco and the region. We are a hub for the world. So we want the trans cultural district and the LGBTQ and the leather district to be accessible by our people that are living in other countries and around the world, right? So how do we really actually use this as an opportunity to reflect inwards and be accessible outwards? So I'm excited, and I think there's actually more work to do as cultural districts, and it's going to be beautiful.
Sparks.
Yeah, I mean, similar to what Julia was saying, I think that one thing that really excites me and excites our board is this, that this is a new animal and that this can have a tremendous effect across the world. I know that I live right in the heart of the Castro, and as I walk by Harvey Milk's camera shop, I think about, could I ever possibly make that much difference as one of our leaders has in history? And what an amazing opportunity the cultural districts are for all of us that are involved to actually play a part in creating a history, the cultural districts that could be, living, breathing, evolving for generations in the future. I think if there's any way that we can really just move beyond local and have a global effect and a positive effect on LGBTQ communities across the world, that would definitely be a huge victory for our cultural district.
Awesome. Bob.
One of the great things about the Leather Pride flag and its location is you can see it from the freeway. And the freeway is elevated there. And every time I come back to town and go past the Leather Pride flag, I see that flag and I feel like I am home. And I know that my people are right down there.
Aria.
Yeah, I love what you said, Michelle, about having that visual and tangible experience of seeing a part of yourself reflected and you just stand a little bit taller. that is definitely the experience that we had when we put the trans flags up in the Tenderloin. And we were working with the city, and the city was like, oh, that's going to take a year. Well, you'll never have that in the time that you're asking for. And oh, what would that even look like? And maybe we should do a town hall first. And we were like, no, we want the flags, and we want them up right before Trans March. And everyone was like, you can't do it. You can't do it. And we prayed, meditated, sent smoke signals, made phone calls. We did everything that we possibly could think of. And there was this magical experience where we started getting tagged on Instagram, and people were coming out of their shops and posting photos of the DPW staff painting the flags on the pole. And then, I came to work the next day, and I just started sobbing because I just had never had that experience of seeing myself or my existence reflected so tangibly in something that you can't remove. Never had that. And I think it gave me so much pride, and because LGBT pride has been a complicated experience for someone like me, where I indulge and celebrate, but oftentimes I don't always feel reflected. And I think when that moment happened, I was like, this is what pride feels like. And this is exactly what it feels like. And it reminded me of the first time I went to Barcelona, and there's like a whole community of that region that is like, has these flags from, oh God, I forget the name of the country. They got absorbed into Spain, but they were a separate country. Anyways, people have these flags everywhere. They're like on t-shirts, they're wearing them, they're in windows, they're in the street markets, the street vendors, and you're like, what is this flag? What's going on? And then you learn a piece of the history. And trans folks in the neighborhood and allies started putting trans flags in their windows. SROs were hanging trans flags from their marquees, all in our neighborhood. And it just made us so proud to be trans. Oftentimes the narrative is, as trans people, with the disparity that we face, there's this assumption that, we're not proud of our bodies, that something is wrong and we're actively trying to correct it, right? And that's like the trans experience. But it was a really unique experience to celebrate specifically being trans and in the Tenderloin, and knowing that our ancestors and trans women that are living today really paved the way for us. And because of oral storytelling, because our history is often not documented and it's often erased, we have access to that legacy, and it's there, and it's cemented in the ground. And there's no feeling like that.
We are cemented in this world, in our time, in our history, and we're here, and we're still here, and it is Pride. Happy Pride. I want to thank all of our panelists for being here with us for the Lavender series, and also for the work that they do in keeping us alive, really. And thank you to San Francisco Pride for being a partner with us in the Lavender series. There's more to come. Check out the full listing at commonwealthclub.org/online. I want to thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you to our sponsors for making this happen, Comcast and the rest of the San Francisco Pride Legacy Partners. And we'll see you next time.